I'm making vegetable soup today, or you can call it a beef stew or a vegetable soup or whatnot, but I've got some meat in it, so it's not just a vegetable soup. Why bother? Why go to all that trouble of prepping all those vegetables and then you have to pressure can because it's a low acid food, so it needs to be pressure canned. So why go to all that trouble? There's a lot of different reasons why. I find it great to have all that soup on hand at any given time. I can just go downstairs in the basement, pop open a bottle of soup, throw it in the microwave, and within a minute or two, I have a meal done. I also find it handy as well if I'm away at work, staying in hotels. You don't always have to go out to eat at the restaurant. I know what I'm eating and I know that it's healthy. So there's lots of different reasons. Power outages, if you have no power, if there's a snowstorm and if you have a little hot plate or some kind of heat source, you can just heat up a bottle of soup. It's really quick. So I find that the maybe 1 hour of prep work to get all the vegetables all cut up is well worth 18 meals of soup all ready to go. So if I've done my calculations correctly, I do expect that I will pretty much have a full canner of pint-sized jars, the 500 milliliter jars. So that will give me 18 meals with soup. I've already got all my prep work done. All my vegetables are all cut up just to kind of save some time. I don't think you need to watch me cut up and dice all those vegetables, but to give you an idea, I have 8 cups of potato, 5 cups of turnip, 2 cups of corn, 3 cups of celery, 8 cups of carrot, 3 cups of onion, and 5 cups of string beans. Now, when it comes to making a vegetable soup or a soup with meat, you can play around a little bit with the ingredients or try some different vegetables as well, as long as you know that it's a vegetable that you are able to can. So one of the things that I've read is that you shouldn't be using rutabaga in soups because it can give it a strong taste. I used turnips in the past and I've never had an issue, but if you decide to try turnips, try it at your own risk. I can't guarantee you, but I never had any problems by putting turnips in the soup. But I have read rutabagas, maybe not quite so sure. You can play around with your quantities of vegetables as long as you follow the processing time and use ingredients that are safe to can. Remember, there are some ingredients that are not safe to can, and that we're talking about your pasta, your rice, noodles. You can't use flour to thicken your soup to make more of a stew. Barley, those are all things that you can't put inside of your soup. So if you really need that in your soup, cook it after, and when you heat up your soup, throw some in. The first thing I'm going to do is to brown my meat. So you don't have to cook your meat completely through. That will cook during the processing time, but you just need to brown it a little bit to get the cooking started. I've got my meat browning. You should try to use some cuts of meat that are fairly lean, and if you don't have to, it's best not to add any type of fat or oil or anything to the pan. If you have to add some because it's wanting to stick, add as little quantity as possible to the bottom of the pan, just enough so it doesn't stick. Like I said, you're just browning your meat enough. You're just turning it and browning it on all the sides just to kind of get it started. The rest of the cooking will be done in the jars. You don't need to add any kinds of seasoning right now. You'll do all that later when you've got all your soup put together. I just bought a stewing meat, but you don't have to buy an expensive beef to do this with, because the pressure canning is gonna make your meat really tender. So this is a stewing beef, but you can buy like an inside round roast and cut it up. Any kind of inexpensive cut of beef. That's what's the beauty of the pressure canning as well. As long as it's lean, it doesn't have to be expensive. What I've done now is I've added all my vegetables to my pots. I've divided it into 2 pots because I've got quite the batch. And also by dividing it into 2 pots, it allows me to kind of make 2 different versions of my soup. So I have one soup here that's going to have a lot more meat and potatoes in it, and maybe a little less of the other kinds of vegetables. Whereas this pot here has a lot less potatoes and a lot more different kind of vegetables. So it's just to kind of try to please everyone's different tastes in soup. I like a tomato-based soup. And you can't add store-bought tomato soup to this because there's a thickener in it. And if you remember, you can't use any kind of thickeners in your soup. So what I've done to create this tomato base is I took a bottle of tomatoes that I had canned this summer and I put it inside, and then I ran an immersion blender in it to kind of make it a little bit more soupy. So I still have my tomato-based soup. And so after I had all my tomatoes all blended up with the immersion blender, and you can leave chunks of tomatoes in there too if you like tomatoes in your soup, then you just make sure that you add enough water in your pot to the height of your vegetables. It will make a nice broth on its own, so be sure to season it well. I probably have at least a tablespoon of salt in each one, and I'm probably going to say a little bit more than that. But season it to taste, put what you like in it to bring it to that flavor that you really like. You have to use either your coarse salt, your pickling salt, or your sea salt, not regular table salt, because we are going to be pressure canning this. And that's why I haven't added my meat yet, so I can continue tasting it. You don't want to put your meat in and start tasting your broth when you have some meat in there that's partially cooked. We don't want to get anybody sick. Remember, it's all about being safe and doing things safely in the kitchen. So I'm making my broth, my soup first. When I've got it how I like it, then I add my meat and heat everything up. We don't cook the vegetables through. We just heat up everything enough to get it nice and boiling hot before transferring to our jars. Perfect. Now that I've got this seasoned to how I like my soup to taste, I'm going to add my meat and bring this all to a boil. I did end up cutting up my meat a little bit because I found the pieces weren't all the same size, and as well I found the pieces were a little bit too big, so I like little bite-sized pieces of meat and not big hunks of meat in my soup. So I will add my meat and bring it to a boil. Now we're going to start putting all of our soup in our jars. If you're not too familiar with how to pressure can, you may want to check out that link that you see up above. I do have a tutorial on how to pressure can, and if you're new to pressure canning, I don't go into all the details in these videos, just to try to keep them shorter, but do check out that tutorial on pressure canning. And as well, if you like the content of my channel, if you'd like to see more videos that I've got out there, don't be shy, hit that subscribe button that you see at the bottom of the screen. It doesn't cost anything, you're not going to get any annoying emails, but you can get notifications when I do put out more content. The best way to put your soup in jars is to actually use more like a slotted spoon to put maybe about half of your bottle full of the vegetables and meat, and then to fill up the rest of your jar with the liquid from your soup. We're going to add the vegetables and meat. And remember, we need to leave a 1-inch head space to allow for the jars to properly seal. So this again is personal preference of how much liquid you like in your soup and how much of the vegetables and meat. So you just fill this up as you prefer, and then you just take a ladle and fill up the rest of your jar with the liquid. I'm using pint-sized jars, so 500 milliliter jars. You can use the quart-sized jars, the larger jars, if you would like to make larger portions of soup. Once you have your soup in your jars, you need to wipe the rims of your jar. Because we're using meat, because there's meat, you need to wipe the rims of your jar with vinegar. You can't use water. The vinegar is going to really help break down any kinds of fat and create the proper seal that you need by using the vinegar. So once you've got your jars wiped down really well, you're going to take your sealing caps that I've had warm, center them on top of your jars, take your rings and put them on fingertip tight. So remember, we've got hot soup, hot jars, they're hot from my dishwasher, and hot caps. So now all I need to do is transfer this over to the pressure canner that I've got warming up back there and get through all my soup and put them all in my jars. Now that all the jars are in the canner, I've turned the heat up. Well, I put the cover on first, then turn the heat up. So now we need to bring this to a good hard boil inside the canner. That allows to vent the pot. Now that we've got a steady stream of steam coming out of our pot, I'm going to vent this for 10 minutes. The pot has vented for 10 minutes. Now I'm going to put the weighted gauge on it and start to build the pressure. I only start timing when my gauge, the dial, gets to 11 pounds of pressure. So putting this on starts building the pressure inside the canner. And it gets a lot quieter too. The pressure canner is just about at 11 pounds of pressure. As you can tell, it's starting to dance, it's starting to shake, starting to make noise again. So I've already started slowly reducing the heat so this doesn't boil up too high. So now that I've hit 11 pounds of pressure, I can start timing. So all I have left to do is to enjoy my coffee while I wait. 75 minutes are up. I need to move this over to a cool part of the oven and let it sit until this button drops. It's going to be quite heavy, so if you can't move it, you're better off leaving it on your stovetop. And now we let it sit for a bit, letting it depressurize. So we've removed the canner from the heat, let the button drop. Once the button had dropped, I removed the weighted gauge and timed for 10 minutes. Now that 10 minutes are up, I can safely remove the cover. Make sure to lift the cover away from your face so as not to get the steam in your face. It's still pretty hot. Now we just need to let it sit for another 10 minutes before we can remove the jar. We're almost done. Now we've let the jars sit for another 10 minutes, we can safely remove them from the canner. Remember, when you remove them from the canner, you need to keep your jars upright without tipping them from side to side. And you need to place them in a spot where they remain untouched for 24 hours. We'll check back to make sure that all our bottles have sealed in about 24 hours. I've ended up with 18 jars of perfectly sealed vegetable soup. I am really excited. This is going to save myself a lot of work. Don't forget to write down the date that you made your soup. If, like me, you've made a couple different varieties, make sure that you mark it down because you can't always tell one from the other. And make sure to remove your rings. Never store your jars with your rings on top. They could create a false seal. And don't stack them in your pantry one on top of the other. Leave them in a single layer. If you like this content, if you like this video, go check out my other videos. I have a lot of different videos out there. And don't be shy, hit that subscribe button and subscribe to my channel. Leave me comments in the comment section if there's something that you'd like to see, something you'd like to see me try. I'd be happy to see what I can do. And check back again soon to see other videos that I'll have coming out.